morning and welcome to the 2019 Business Summit and State of the City Address. My name is Katie Toma and I am the President and CEO of the CHICO Chamber. I would like to start off by thanking you all for coming this morning for this very important annual event. I would also like to thank the City of Chico for partnering with us today, to CARD for providing this room, and thanks to the Chamber's legacy partners who are instrumental in moving Chico forward. They are LIABILity HR and Payroll Service, California Water Service, Golden Valley Bank, Sierra Nevada Brewery, and Orange Theory Fitness. We'd also like to acknowledge our visionary partners, Alliance for Workforce Development, Chico State, Comcast, Enloe Medical Center, 5 Star Bank, Healthy Solutions Insurance Services, LRT Graphics, Recology, Butte and Colusa Counties, Results Imagery, Slater & Son, Strati, TransferFlow, Tri-Counties Bank, and Waste Management. Thank you for partnering with the Chamber. We'd also like to welcome our elected officials, beginning with, well, he's not elected, but from an elected official's office, Brett Sanders from Congressman LaMalfa's office, Sadie Foster from Jim Nielsen's office, and District Rep Braden Pisani from Assemblyman James Gallagher's office. Thanks for coming. And from the City of Chico, the Mayor, Randall Stone, thank you for coming. Vice Mayor Alex Brown, I didn't see her come in, if she's here or not. Council Member Sean Morgan, Council Member Carl Ori, Council Member Casey Reynolds, and Council Member Ann Schwab. Council Member Huber was not able to make it this morning as he had committed several months ago to lead a field trip for the Snow Goose Festival. And now I'd like to thank the city staff, and there's a great turnout of them this morning, and we really do appreciate the work you do, the long hours you keep, so thank you. We particularly want to recognize City Manager Mark Orme, who has faithfully served as an ex officio member of the Chamber Board, as a Chamber Board Director for many years. We regret that we neglected to introduce him as a board member at our annual dinner last week. So we just want you to, I know, no love. So Mark, I just want to say to you, we appreciate you, and I'm sorry for the oversight. I can't see you. Don't you hate that when that happens? Oh my gosh. I also want to give a shout out to the Chamber board members that are present here today. We have a terrific group of committed volunteers, so thank you for all you do. And I want to thank the Young Professional Organization for being our greeters this morning. You will find a card on your seat that gives you information about their great organization. So please, when you have a minute, take a look at that. And of course, I want to give a shout out to the best staff in town, Heather and Becky. So thank you for everything, and they are the detail people. So thank you so much. Okay, so on to the reason why we're here this morning. So this morning's agenda is going to include an approximately 10-minute presentation from Mayor Randall Stone on the City Council's priorities. And then a 20-minute presentation, 20 minutes or so, from City Manager Mark Orme on their survey results, an update on the proposed sales tax measure, and lastly, he'll give an update on housing. And then we'll hear from Public Works Director, Engineering, Brendan Ottoboni, with an update on roads and upcoming projects, which I hope will include the grading of my alley. He always tells me no. After the city presentations, we'll hear from past Chamber Board Chair, Mark Francis, who is the President and CEO of Golden Valley Bank, who, by the way, was instrumental in the development of the Chamber's community vision. He will give an approximately 20-minute presentation on the Chico Economic Snapshot. And our last presentation will be from current Board Chair Jolene Francis of Enloe Medical Center, who will speak to the special report publication. Following the chair's presentation, we will moderate a question and answer session with our panel. To submit a question, please fill out a yellow card, and that was also on your chair, and hand it to either Heather or Becky. So Heather's there, Becky is going to be on the other side of the room. So look to them to give your questions to. So now please join me in welcoming the mayor of Chico, Randall Stone.
Okay, well, thank you all very much. Thank you for being here. This is an important event for the entire community to get a sense of what's happening, where the direction of the city is going, and what's most important to all of you. I also want to start by thanking city staff, and I'd like you all to join me in just a moment. The amount of work and time that they've put in post-campfire is absolutely unreal. And for most of them, they haven't seen a pay raise in over 10 years. So let that all settle in, the amount of time that they're spending, the dedication to the city. I'd like you all to give them a round of applause for all city staff in every department. Now, due to all of that fantastic work, despite what you may have heard recently, the city does not have a $20 million surplus this year. To put such a claim in context, recognizing that the general fund budget is $54 million, having 37% more revenue than your annual expenditures must indicate spending stopped or something along those lines for 37% of the year. And obviously that didn't happen. But what did happen is an increase of about $2 million in additional unanticipated revenues so far. And again, we're treating these funds as they are, one-time funds, while working to address infrastructure demands, of which I'll tangentially cover in a few moments. In short, revenues are up and up beyond conservative estimates. And there are a tremendous number of fiscal pressures, so this is welcome news right now. Sales tax revenues are up and continue to be up. And as you may recall, the last budget cycle, the council revised sales tax forecasts and budget expectations, anticipating reductions in revenues. That reduction never materialized, and we continue to see sales tax revenues grow beyond expectations. But sales taxes are increasing at a decreasing rate. That's the derivative. Moving Chico into the next decade, and we can expect to continue to see Chico sales tax revenue increasing at that decreasing rate. Until such time as the California State Legislature determines a course of action to correct sales tax leakage from online purchases, the city can continue to expect this revenue source to decline. And yet, despite that backdrop, the downtown area, year after year, shows a 9.7% growth in sales tax generation. This is the ongoing trend that continues year in and year out. Even with so much dramatization of the region via homelessness, the sales tax continues that growth pattern. And there are a number of boarded up buildings in downtown Chico as they transform and drive property and sales tax revenues even further up. Downtown is back and it is kicking butt. Short-term rentals are looking at about $120,000 to $150,000 per year in revenue to the city. Remember that this regulation on short-term rentals began just as I took over as mayor in 2018 and now represents an unloaded raw annual cost of a police officer on the beat. Short-term rentals now fund a police officer. Property tax revenues are up 3% to the general fund and about 7% when including the former RDA claims to each taxing entity in the district. That being said, Chico is one of the only cities of our size in California that does not have its own share of exclusive sales tax revenue, recalling that only about 1% of state sales taxes are received by the city of Chico. But this city intends to act and have asked the voters of Chico to weigh in on a sales tax measure to benefit road maintenance, staff deficiencies, public safety, and homelessness, and Mark will be talking a little bit more about that. The ballot measure that will be on the November 2020 ballot. It could generate as much as $18 million annually for roads, public safety, and infrastructure. Now, the city of Chico depends on infrastructure improvements to develop residential housing, and this is a critical component of some of the current housing constraints in this city. The most effective mechanism to facilitate additional housing in this community is to fund the capital infrastructure necessary for these developments to occur, and we've been doing just that. What it is that I'm talking about are roads, bridges, sewer extensions, and storm water projects that are necessary for new housing to be developed. Without these infrastructure needs, the additional residents cannot be properly annexed into the city without considerable negative externalities to the surrounding neighborhoods. The city requested $21 million to widen Bruce Road that will help facilitate significant housing and affordable housing units, including bridges over several intersections. Roadway grants and increased expenditures on our road maintenance is continuing to grow, and with grant funding growing exponentially, thanks to city staff again, it is inexcusable for our roads to be in the condition that they're currently in, and our revenue plans directly address this problem. Let's talk housing. Understanding the role of municipal governance, it is important to recognize that cities do not produce housing. That's not their function. Cities make the conditions for development possible through land use regulation and, where available, financial support or deeded land. Those who might question this rationale, that municipal government should be a landlord, need only look to the recently demolished and infamous Cabrini Green of South Chicago and other housing disasters of the late 20th century. Government as property manager has demonstrably failed over the course of the last century, and the city of Chico intends to avoid this debacle. However, in 2019, we saw the construction of 305 single-family residential units and 175 multifamily residential units. This represents a big year in housing production for Chico. For perspective, in 2018, there were 270 single-family housing units and 285 multifamily housing units, constructed for a total of 555 new units. This total is slightly less than the 577 units built in 2017, which was the highest housing unit total since 2006. In other words, even before the campfire, housing production was high. There remains a significant plug of multifamily units under construction, over 570 units, that will likely be completed in 2020, with some 1,500 multifamily dwelling units in plan check or mostly under construction. There continues to remain approximately 2,500 single-family homes and 2,800 multifamily residential units in the near-term pipeline, reflecting the city is entitling development proposals in a timely manner and efficient manner. It is now left to the private sector to proceed with development. Now, we also widened and loosened the rules on accessory dwelling units. These are typically called mother-in-law units, which will expand the production of those sweet spot 1 and 2 bedroom units without adding additional infrastructure demands within the city. So it's an important housing development tool. Skipping ahead here a little bit. Last year, I met directly with Governor Gavin Newsom and his staff in Grass Valley and worked out a proposal to open and commit surplus state property for conversion for affordable housing. In Chico, there are few opportunities on this front, but nevertheless, opportunities exist. The city of Chico has put out an official request for information to the entire community for affordable housing development concepts on city-owned land or other governmentally owned land in Chico. Concepts are being solicited for vacant land, redevelopment of existing sites, or any other combination or concept. Proposals will be provided to the council and investigated for opportunities for future collaboration. And starting this spring, we will begin the process of updating the housing element of our general plan, encouraging and facilitating more affordable housing and housing that is affordable. For reference, a housing element update is a major undertaking that includes significant community input. That means all of you. A housing element update lays out a plan to facilitate affordable housing and provides the most appropriate forum for new ideas to be incorporated into the city's long-range planning documents. Still, affordable housing needs remain pervasive since the dissolution of redevelopment agencies in California in 2012. If anything, dissolution of RDAs has created a vacuum of need subsequent to the Great Recession and declining incomes in the state. While our immediately improved economic conditions will help the larger community, those lower income and special needs populations will always need additional resources for safety and decent and sanitary housing. And that need continues to grow in our community. In fact, that's the problem throughout the rest of California as well. Although there have been public reports of residents leaving the state, this does not tell the real story. The fact of the matter is that for people above a certain income level, the investment is being made to come to California in droves. Working class people are being squeezed out of the ever-increasing luxury home markets. The current housing plans submitted by the private sector show ever-increasing McMansions and urban sprawl. Unfortunately for this community, housing unaffordability is particularly acute. This past year, of all the multifamily units constructed, nearly every unit was marketed towards luxury and affluent tenants. It is important to note that the timing of private development is driven by a number of complex factors, including demand, financing, infrastructure obligations, state and federal permitting, availability of workforce, cost of materials, all of those things. But the fact remains, even in the face of a regional disaster, The housing market has not substantively shifted its production designs to incorporate more market-based affordable housing. And it is because of this dire circumstance and effective inaction by the industry that I'm calling on the City of Chico to more aggressively address housing affordability and availability and reiterate my request for Council to pass a 10% inclusionary zoning ordinance, mandating that housing affordability be at the forefront of multifamily housing development. Now, inclusionary zoning policies can reduce or eliminate concentration effects and improve the socioeconomics of both the residents as well as the surrounding community without any increases in crime or degradation of the community. Simply put, the industry has demonstrated that unless it is a mandate, they will not develop to address this market failure. Last year, the California State Legislature passed AB 1482, and without question, the most sweeping tenant protections in the country. But it still wasn't enough. Since the campfire, we know that rents have increased 30% and 40% in some cases, with no appreciable impact on affordable construction, as I just noted. When I was a kid, I marveled at other countries' inequities between their rich and their poor, once flippantly asking my father why we just don't move to another country where the value of the dollar would be so much larger. My father said, "Ran, you can live on the backs of poor people for a while, but eventually they revolt." And in California, we're seeing that revolt through AB 1482. We're seeing that revolt in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and the decision to stay the ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court. We're seeing that through the council's proposed just cause eviction and rent increase restrictions. And we're seeing that in the eyes of the people who suffer through homelessness in Chico. This city intends to act, and we will take the necessary actions to stabilize rent and housing for our community. The industry continues to resist while proffering nor developing any solutions to the affordability problems, including failing to adjust unit design. And I believe I wish I had some more time to talk about crime and additional details in homelessness, but I think I'm well beyond my time. I'll have to leave immediately after this, unfortunately. I'm on the Housing, Community, and Economic Development Committee that's meeting in Sacramento right now with the League of California Cities. But I'll stick around as long as the program allows. Thank you.
I always wish I were taller. Mayor, thank you I know you were in Sacramento yesterday and you're heading back today, so we appreciate you taking the time to come back and present this morning. So next, I'd like to introduce City Manager Mark Orme, who has all kinds of things to say this morning. So take it away.
Thank you very much. What an honor and a privilege to be here this morning. What an amazing group of beautiful faces out there. This is our community that I'm standing in front of, and it's an honor and a privilege to serve as your city manager. And I also want to just say thank you, Mayor, for recognizing staff. What an amazing group of people that I get to work with on a daily basis, and I'll be probably mentioning some of their names as I go through this. But go ahead and get this baby clicked off, because we've got a lot to go through. And there's very little time, which is okay, because maybe it'll just spur questions in your mind. You can reach back out and say, hey, give me a little bit more on this or a little bit more on that. I think that's good and that's healthy in a community. So what do we got here? This is really a simple vision of what I wanted to tell you. What is the framework of the city employee's mind? And over the past 6.5 years, I've had a grand opportunity to be able to build a team that's resilient and capable and competent to get the job done. You'll note up there the lean modeling rather than this government bloat. Obviously, governments are oftentimes viewed as just this, well, fat pig. And what we've done is we've taken out the slicer and dicer, and we've, at a necessity, had to bring our government down and right-size it. Unfortunately, way too much. And you've seen the effects of that as you drive down the road. You've seen the effects of that as you walk through the park. You've seen the effects of that in a number of areas, as I have as well. And so we need to do something about that, and it's up to the community to decide what that is going to be. There's also this interdepartmental collaboration that was necessitated during this lean period as well. No more siloism, no more living in your own little community, whether it's the police department, fire department, public works, administrative services, HR. We can no longer live in a bubble independently working for the city. We really have become a very interdependent group. We meet regularly, every week we meet, and it's an amazing team opportunity to build a relationship and to find out ways of leveraging the resources that we do have. And then also it's a fiscal focus. When you have little money to get the job done that's necessary, you actually have to understand the finances. And this city has learned the finances far better than most. And so we're proud of that. And also, one of the things in the frame of mind that I ensure is deliberative each and every day in the office is stay apolitical. Don't get in the middle of politics. It's a difficult challenge in Chico because we are a politically motivated community, and it's seen every couple of weeks. And that's okay. But city staff has to remain vigilant and resilient and do our job without getting political. And I'm proud to say that our team is doing that to a large degree. So what else have we done? We've invested tremendously in technology. When you have lean staffing models, you have to look for opportunities to leverage technology uses. And there's a number of things listed up there, but I will tell you that there's been millions of dollars invested over the past number of years in technology to help allow us to be able to serve the public better. And you know, I'm looking at Administrative Services Director Dowell up here up front, and the amazing work that he's done to bring our finance department to a way where we can be as transparent as possible about our finances is incredible. I see HR Director Cannon kind of behind him, catty corner, and internally, we had such an antiquated system of actually caring for our city and our employees. She is just evolutionary, brought this thing forward to a point where it's just amazing. And I can go down the list with Director Gustafson, Chief Standards, Chief O'Brien. You just go down the list of department directors that have driven their departments to a more technology-dependent system, which I think is beautiful and allows us not to have to hire as many employees. However, we still need employees to operate those things. The next one is simple, straightforward. City operations, we need reliable assets and properties. And therefore, I'm going to introduce my Public Works Director over engineering to share a little bit about something that's really important to all of you and me, our tires and our engines of our cars and everything else that we ride around on, our bicycles. So Brendan, come on up. He's going to share a little bit about our public infrastructure.
Great, thank you again. Thank you for having me. Typically, Public Works doesn't get the opportunity to speak at these kinds of things, so it's a great opportunity to communicate. So my presentation, again, going to be kind of short, will be available for questions after, but going to kind of start at a high level, 50,000-foot elevation, and then get down to a little bit more specificity regarding roadway maintenance. So first slide, I always like to show this. What is infrastructure? Well, it's everything. It's around us, everywhere we go. It's stuff that's under the ground. It's our sewer lines and water lines. It's utilities, whether it's electrical, it's water. And then it's streets and roads. It's bike paths, it's bridges, street lights, traffic signals. It's all around us, and there's a lot that goes into maintaining that. So between the engineering department and the operations and maintenance department, we're really doing a lot of things behind the scenes, and typically a lot of that goes unnoticed until it's broken, it doesn't work, and then it's really noticeable. And so it's kind of a fire drill to get out there and fix these things. And Director Gustafson's crew is doing an amazing job of doing that and getting out there and fixing those when available. Next, benefits of infrastructure. A couple things just touch on. Quality of life. When we're able to build quality infrastructure, it's reliable, it's safe, it has safety functions built into it. And it provides a level of efficiency, whether it's a sewer system that has miles of connected pipes. When you flush the toilet, that ends up going out to our water pollution control plant 3 miles out River Road. So there's a lot that goes into that is thought out, is planned, and then maintained properly. It's improved public safety. So implementing a lot of our strategies, whether it's a traffic signal network that can reduce traffic collisions, roundabouts that improve, again, reduction in collisions. It's things like that that we can do to help offset the number of collisions or reported items where hopefully our police and fire departments don't have to respond to as many issues, and they can do what they do on a daily basis. It's good for the local economy, so especially in the capital projects division, which is the largest budget in the city. I believe it's over $50 million of funding. That also equates to a healthy local economy. So when we put out projects, we're hiring consultants, we're working with staff, but then at the end of the day, we put out a project for bid and we hire local contractors. And that includes local trades, whether it's carpenters, operating engineers, laborers, electricians. that's all money that gets infused into our local economy, and it creates that healthy circle of flow of cash through the economy. And then at the end of the day, too, you also get the benefit of having that infrastructure. It protects our environment. So again, a lot of the stuff we can do is with multimodal transportation, complete streets design, all that kind of stuff leads to improved offsets of greenhouse gas emissions. And then in our stormwater section division, we also implement projects that then also improve our local waterways and ultimately protects the environment through aspects of those types of projects. Next slide. I just kind of want to touch real quick for those that don't know educationally. Government financing is not straightforward. It's every dollar has a different color to it kind of thing, and that was one thing I really learned quickly when I got into working for the city here. And so just touching on the fact that a lot of what we do with those projects is not general fund, which is discretionary. We get a small amount of general fund, but we're talking, multiple restricted use funds. So all those different funds have things that those dollars can be spent on. So it's critical that we be creative with how we get projects done. And being in rural Northern California, the amount of dollars that we get in those restricted funds typically isn't enough to build a project by itself. So we have to leverage funds against each other in order to really get projects delivered. And so there's a lot of creativity that goes into that. And then we're leveraging those dollars to go after state and federal grants so we can even do more with our limited amount of funds. And happy to say we've been very successful in that. So just a little bit of education as it relates to that. And so again, grant success. Over the last 5 years, we've received about $52 million in grant funds. For context, I think in the prior 10 years, we had gotten about $30 million. So we're doing a lot of good things. And then right now, we're working on 3 massive grant applications that will have huge community benefit. One is the Bruce Road widening. One is Cohasset Road widening out to the airport, and the third would be our intelligent transportation system to upgrade our citywide traffic signal network and reduce congestion. So those 3 alone in the next 2 months are going to equate to about $42 million in itself. So our staff is working extremely hard behind the scenes, getting all that information, working with our state and federal partners to be able to get those dollars into our community and again, inject our local economy with projects that have multiple benefits. Next, I'll start getting into our road conditions, which is typically a hot topic and we hear a lot about. So for context, when we pave a road, there's a life expectancy on that material. It degrades over time. It's a known thing. And so I kind of have a life cycle curve. This is kind of an engineering thing if we like our curves and graphs and stuff. But you can see where we were at on that curve in 2015, and with the budgeting that we've put towards roadway maintenance, we're continuing to decline down that curve of needing to fix our roads. So we put it in context of kind of maintaining your car. When you get your car, at some point your service change your oil soon kind of comes on. Then sooner or later your check engine light comes on, and if you don't get it fixed, then your car breaks down. So for an analogy of car maintenance, we're in that check engine light phase. So without increased revenue in order to spend on our roads, it's going to continue to decrease. Next slide. So what are conditions? So Eaton Road, we just paved that, so that's an excellent condition. We have what's called a pavement condition index, which kind of analyzes on a scale of 0 to 100 what the condition of your roads. Excellent condition is 90 to 100. You can kind of see a picture there of what that might look like. Next would be very good. That's 2nd Street downtown that received a slurry seal several years ago. That's 70 to 89. Good condition, Park Avenue, I believe there, is 50 to 69. And poor condition, Park Avenue, I believe that is 25 to 49. And then you have very poor, which I think that's Rio Lindo. We get a lot of comments about Rio Lindo. I think that's a 0. So you can see again as the life of the road deteriorates, you start to see cracking, potholes come up, and then our maintenance crews are trying to fill potholes. And if you don't fix potholes correctly, you end up with lots of potholes, and then you lose the roadway. So for context, that's what we talk about when we talk about roadway maintenance. Ideally, you would catch your road at the 75%, 75 PCI, and you would apply a slurry seal, and that kind of gets, you can see the red dotted line there, gets you back up to that excellent condition. That way you can do preventative maintenance and prevent that roadway from failing and having to do a full reconstruction. Typically you hear in the industry that it's about 10 to 14 times more expensive to have to do a full reconstruction than applying multiple slurry seals over the life of that roadway. Next slide. A couple months ago, we updated our pavement management program, and the council adopted that plan and recognized kind of where we're at. So we're currently at a pavement condition index of a 52. Our last update was in 2015, which was a 61. So again, we're continuing to go down. If we do nothing, we'll be at a 42 here in the next 5 years. And here's some different funding scenarios that was the outcome of that study. So just generically, $6.5 million per year would maintain a PCI of 52. Currently, we're budgeting at about $3 to $3.2 million, and so we're below that. So based on the current budgeting, if nothing else changes, we'll continue to decrease in our pavement condition index. The recommended alternative to increase our pavement condition index by 1 point per year would be investing $12.5 million per year. And I want to caveat that that's just roadway maintenance. That's not all the other forms of infrastructure that are unfunded as well that I talked about. It doesn't do complete streets with sidewalks and lighting and all those other elements related to a kind of a complete street. So that's just purely roadway maintenance. Next slide, please. Just for context too, again, between Director Gustafson and myself, we kind of handle this, we triage it. They do certain things that help be very efficient and effective with our implementation of our pavement management program. And then the engineering department, we typically do the larger projects, again, hiring the contractors, whereas the operations and maintenance staff, they can be deployed immediately. If there's a huge pothole, they're out there instantly filling that and addressing those more immediate needs. So just kind of wanted to put in context that we work very collaboratively, as City Manager Orme mentioned, and do a great job of trying to be as cost-effective and efficient as possible. So projects. Our last project was done in the summer of 2018. I think Cohasset Road was, through a poll in our local newspaper, identified as the worst road in Butte County. Just so happened we had already been working on the plans to repave that. So kind of before and after of what that entailed. And then this upcoming year, we've been working on the Esplanade reconstruction, which really will go from Bidwell Mansion all the way to Eaton Road. Full reconstruction from Lindo Channel North and a slurry seal Lindo Channel South. So again, you can kind of see a lot of the conditions there, severe cracking, and we're going to grind out that top layer and put down fresh asphalt. So coming summer of 2020, that's roughly about a $4 to $4.5 million construction project that'll be going out this summer for work. And in context of the sales tax measure, if additional revenues are implemented towards roadway maintenance, we've kind of identified some kind of year 1, year 2, and year 3 strategies that we would see as big bang for our buck and be able to go out and improve the community. But you can see 3 years of substantial funding. There's still a lot to still fix there, and our focus would primarily be on our major roadways, our arterials and collectors, and then try and integrate some of our local roadways so we can start improving those kind of one by one as those are available. And again, leveraging our operations and maintenance crews to do certain things in those local streets as well. I think that concludes my component. So thank you very much, and we'll be around.
So that gives you a really good idea. And these kind of analytics where you can actually go down and look at the baseline PCI, that index wasn't readily available previously, and now we have that. And so we can share with the public our condition of our roadways. That's huge. And so those analytics are essential for any local government to, I believe, show the community where we're at in order for them to make decisions. So here we go. I'm going to plow through this because I think I've got 2 minutes. I'm kidding. Somewhere around there. I think I just got a little bit of grace over here, so I think she's going to give me a little more. So let's go ahead and plow through this. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of capital infrastructure that we have in the city. I'm just going to highlight this. Our 2030 general plan talks about complete streets. A lot of cities will just go in and just do the roadway, but neglect the curb, gutter, sidewalk, lighting, et cetera. You heard Brendan talk about that. We are a complete street city. We need to do complete streets. There's a lot of pedestrian walking in Chico, a lot of bike riding. There's a lot of other essential modes of transportation. So we need to be looking at complete streets. And so that's how we're envisioning how we're going to move forward. I'm not going to go into all these details here because Brendan just did on all of this aspect around roads. But you can tell the difference between if we only focused on roads versus complete streets. There's a big cost differential there, but the visual, the physical improvements are that much better for our community, so that's what we're focused on. Go ahead and let's roll through these things. So in our parks, you know that we have over 3,800 acres of parks. Obviously, over 3,600 of those is Bidwell Park. How blessed are we to have Bidwell Park? Wow. But I will tell you that for folks that have parks, typically the median 5-year capital budget is about $7 million for a city of our size, as you'll see up there. We're investing about $1.5 million annually into our parks, well below where we need to be. Storm sewers, I like to call them storm drains. They can call them storm sewers. We have about 229 miles. We don't have a dedicated funding source. We've looked at some studies. There was one out of San Diego that noted that typically cities have a fee from $1 to $13 per month. That's about $264,000 to $3.6 million if you looked at Chico and our number of single-family dwellings. We're investing $140,000 annually, and we don't have any fees to cover the costs of that. So that's another difficult challenge that we're going through. The next one on sanitary sewer, go ahead and rock and roll the next one there. We got 220 miles of sewer pipe, and we are currently conducting a study, and hopefully we'll be coming out with those findings by the end of the year. I think that out of the 2 enterprises the city has, we can do better in those enterprises, and so we want to continue to ensure that when you flush the toilet, it does work, and it goes somewhere other than in your house. So the next one are streets. We have over 300 miles of streets, and you already heard Brendan talk about that. Traffic signals, over 100 of those, and I'm not going to get into the details of our traffic signals, but the bottom line is our investment is lower than what it should be. This is a trend. And then there's a lot of other things, trees, public buildings, vehicles, technology. It's an amazing thing that we have to ensure that you can experience as a member of the public, and there is a lack of investment in all of the above, but we are utilizing the resources the best we can. The next one is simply staffing. What I've continued to do year after year is attempt to put together staffing plans. And so I reach out to my department directors and I say, okay, so currently this year, where are we at and what should we do? We estimated extremely conservatively, because we don't want to bloat, is that we needed, and this was the last one I put together, a little over $10 million in staffing. The highest staffing ratio that we could find in years past was back in 2007, and it was 1 employee per every 175 residents, and then the 2018 actual ratio was 1 for every 258, so obviously that is not even close to where we were in 2007. The staffing model that I thought that we could live with back in 2018, the end of 2018, would have brought us up to 1 in 208, still not meeting the 2007 staffing ratios. And the cost to achieve the 2007 staffing ratios for 2018 would have been over $19 million. So my $10 million plan was fantastic. Because that is a lot. We can't afford to overgrow the city with staffing, but we will be reasonable in approach if we do have resources to do that. The next one is our long-term liabilities. The pension liabilities, they continue to be mentioned time and time again. We have to be responsible stewards. We have to ensure that our retirees are guaranteed what they were guaranteed, but we need help. We need help at the state legislature. I know both our senator and our assemblyman understand these complexities, and they'll do everything they can to help us on this. But we need legislative help, and if we can't have legislative help, we need help in the court system to help find a way of dealing with the pension liability. But we still need to be responsible and ensure that we're paying that. You'll see that it'll increase to about $4 to $5 million at the heightened end, additional than what we currently pay. And we anticipate that'll be around 2030 as the high point, and then it starts to decline from there. So as long as we can survive through there, I think we'll be A-okay. Utility users tax, we're continuing to see that decrease. That was one of the revenues that was coming into the city. Obviously, not a lot of people still have their phones at home. They're using their cell phones. The economy, as the mayor said, it's continuing to increase, but at a decreasing level. And we'll see how that goes. And that's okay, as long as it continues to increase. But we know there's going to be a down drop in the economy, and there will be a recession at some point, so we need to be extremely conservative on that front. And then campfire impacts. Every presentation I've given for the past year and a half has been on the campfire, so thank you for allowing me to talk about something other than the campfire, as important as that is. But I do have to mention it here because we did see a temporary revenue increase, and we're going to see how that impacts the city. The next slide kind of intimates the same thing. With that population increase, we anticipated personnel costs that we would need to cover that increase in population at about $196 million. And infrastructure needs also a large number. So we'll see. We'll see how we end up coming out of the campfire, and we'll go from there. But what is the solution? And in many people's minds, it's either keep cutting, change your model of governance, or, and I want to thank the City Council for allowing this option to be in the public to see if it's an option that people are willing to do, can create a monthly reoccurring revenue. So go ahead and go to the next one. What could that look like? Well, the City Council authorized staff to go out for a revenue measure survey, and that was done in September of this last year, so just a few months ago. You'll note on there were some concerns that were voiced, and they were looking at prioritizing specific things: emergency response, fixing potholes, all the stuff that you can imagine that people would say. Maintenance of city streets, storm drains, and sidewalks were at the top of the list. A vast majority, which was incredible to see the numbers, which I'll show you in a sec, of people were supportive of that. And a compelling reason to keep Chico safe and protect the local quality of life. We continue to hear that, and that was resonating in the survey results. So let me show you some of those heightened areas where people gave their response to. Impacts of homelessness, and homelessness itself was the greatest number of concern that was voiced by folks, and important problems to deal with. High cost of housing and high cost of living, crime, infrastructure, our roads, which we already spoke to. So that's a snapshot of what those results came back at. Next. And there's the number that came back. As you can see, that far exceeded anybody's expectation of support, and it shows this community really wants to help the city through this. 77% said that there is a need for a revenue measure. That is mind-blowing. You don't see those numbers typically in cities. And then there was little to no need at 13%, and then didn't know, 10%. So, and just so you know, that was a plus or minus 4.9% margin of error on these numbers. Voter priorities, rolling through this, you'll see that in this one what we did is we packaged them with extremely important, somewhat important, and important. And so we quantified those as total importance. The one that had the highest length of all three of those together is maintaining and repairing our streets, storm drains, and sidewalks. Protecting 911 emergency response times, you'll see, came in right behind it at 87%. Preserving the number of on-duty firefighters. Where are the firefighters? I see them out there. Hey, Ken. That's rated very high, 85%. Fixing potholes, obviously, and then preserving the number of on-duty police officers. Those were all over 80%. The next thing is what they did in this survey, and I don't know if any of you were a part of it, but they'll say, initially, here's, would you be interested in this? And then they give them some additional information on what the money could go to, and then they give them additional information on what somebody would say against a tax. And as you can see in those numbers, there's still an overwhelming majority of folks that are willing to invest in the city to achieve success. So I'm going to fly through this here. Economic data, about $18 million in revenue would be received with a 1%. That is what the council asked us to go and research. And just when you look at it very conservatively, you'd have about 12 to 13 million to support infrastructure bonds and or adding some staff. That is extremely conservative because what we want to look at is the economy as it goes up and down. We don't want to overinvest and hire staff or invest in a bond and not be able to pay it back or pay for those employees. We've been through that before. We don't ever want to do that again. So it has to be prudent. And then, and as you very well know, our sales tax is the lowest you can have in the state of California. And even with a 1%, we would still be less than over 50% of the cities in the state of California. So what would be the timeline for something like this? City Council is going to be hearing their final resolution of approval either next month or the month thereafter. We've gone through a lot of individuals to get this through a process in order to get it back to council. Obviously, you vote later this year, and then after the election, it has to be certified January through March. Council would then be looking at approving a budget with those numbers, and then you would see some impact that year thereafter. This next one is just, and you can go right past that. We are really relying upon in the state of California sales tax. What we've seen is it's that largest single revenue that we get in the city. And we've seen it continually steadily increasing, and this is the past few years here. And you can see each of these categories going up. You've got general consumer goods being the one way up there. You've got building and construction kind of hitting its peak there, the other blue color, and so on and so forth. But it just goes to show that if there were a sales tax, it will dramatically impact our ability to respond to the citizens by doing these kind of things. You want these guys, go ahead and go to the next one. You want these guys to be able to respond when there's something going on in Upper Bidwell Park. The next one. You want these folks to be out there redoing all of our roadways, getting our sewer maintained to a level where you can rely upon it. Next one. You want our parks to be able to be remedied to help the folks that are struggling with their life right now, and a level of engagement that's necessary in this community to keep our parks family-friendly and moving in the right direction. And the last item that I'm going to note really quick is housing. Yeah, really quick. This is a statewide issue, and there's only so much a city can do about housing. I think the mayor spoke a little bit about it earlier. Land use regulation is the primary thing that we can do. We can ensure that there's adequate land for private industry to do what they do, and that's build. There's also the infrastructure that we need to supply in the public services, police, fire, all the basic services that you rely upon. Some of the things that are out of our control to a large degree are regulations. We have to collect fees based upon regulations pursuant to the state of California's desires. And a lot of those things really are irritating to the development community, and they're expensive. And so there's only so much we can do with regard to regulations. And we can help on the processing end, and I know that our staff continues to look for opportunities to increase our ability to process these projects when they come through. But I will tell you, the place where we are dramatically weakened from years past when I originally was starting in government is we no longer have a funding source to help the development community. And it used to be called redevelopment. Some cities took advantage of it. I wasn't here during CHICO'S day and age. I assume you guys didn't. But some did, and it got swept away from local municipal agencies to be able to help do these infrastructure pieces to help development really thrive. And so that's a huge lack, and we really need that. But I will commend the development community. I meet with them on a monthly basis, and I understand the complex issues that they're faced with. I meet with the city council on twice basis, and I know the complex issues that they're faced with from a public perspective. These are challenges that the city of Chico is not going to solve on our own. We're going to need the state of California to step up and help us in a large way, and I know that our assemblyman and our senator are attempting to do that continually. I'm not going to read this. Bottom line is housing element's going to be coming forward later this year. If you are interested in housing, this is your opportunity to participate in a public process. That's essential, and there's a lot of information there. But the bottom line is, and I'm only going to focus on one word here, stewardship. We know as city employees that this is not our money. This is taxpayer dollars, and we have to steward it well. And that basic bottom line essential understanding is so important for us because we are not here to be frivolous with the funding. We know where the needs are. You've seen a lot of them right here. And we are intent on deploying our resources to the best way that we possibly can. We want to be a transparent government. We have been. We've been so transparent, everybody knows our numbers. Everybody knows, anyway, we have nothing to hide. And then government doesn't have all the answers. That's what I wanted to finish off with. You can go to the next slide. Government will never have all the answers. When our forefathers established our government, they knew that it was not an easy thing. It's actually a hard thing to have a government because it can be a really difficult master. So we have to balance those, and it's extremely difficult to do that. I believe that the council is doing their best. I believe that city staff is doing their best, and I know that this community will do its best to make a decision based upon the facts. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to share with you today, and I wish you a great day. Thank you.
So I want to thank you both for that very, very good presentation. And you got to say, Brendan is the most passionate engineer I have ever met. And he's a great communicator, and I've learned so much about roads. And you know, it's like a little bit of information is really dangerous. So, but I want to reiterate also what the city manager said about transparency and stewardship, that he has empowered his department heads to meet with the public and to speak on the behalf of their department. So I just want to say thank you for that we do have ample opportunity to meet with those folks, and we do. And I'm sure that at times they get tired of us knocking on their doors or calling them, emailing, but they are responsive and responsible. So thank you for that, Mark. We really appreciate that. Just a reminder with the yellow cards, with the questions, that if you do have questions, unfortunately the mayor had to leave, but if you have questions for Mark, Orme, Brendan, and then Mark Francis eventually. So make sure that you fill those out. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Mark Francis, President and CEO of Golden Valley Bank, also a Chamber board member, past chair, to come up and do his presentation on the Chico Economic Snapshot. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Katie. Yesterday I was comparing my notes to past years, and I did notice something, and that was that the print keeps getting bigger every year. So this used to be so easy. Several years ago, when Kaylin Chapman of Harris Commercial Real Estate was an intern for us, and is Kaylin here today? There he is back there. We put this local economic snapshot together, seasonally adjusted it, and except for building permits, we had relatively smooth lines and fairly easily predictable metrics. But you throw in a spillway incident and the worst wildfire in California history, and the whole thing goes to hell. The hard work behind the snapshot is done by Kaylin. We especially appreciate the help we get from the city of Chico and from Debbie Zimke from REMAX. We couldn't do it without them. I've also borrowed some slides from Dr. Robert Eiler's presentation at the North State Economic Forecast last week. You've heard it, you know it. We're in local economic times that we've never experienced before. You know, we've lost 14,000 homes, where between 7,500 and 12,500 of our Chico workforce lived. 30,000 people displaced, far worse than the recent fires in these other counties. And yes, while the population in Chico has certainly increased, the overall population in the county is down 10,000. That's not good news for the retail hub of the region. And are more going to leave? Maybe. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. I'm generally not a pessimistic guy, unless, of course, you get me going on the pension scam. The Chico Economic Snapshot measures quarterly where we've been, using 5 seasonally adjusted and equally weighted categories: sales tax, dollar value of building permits issued, average housing sales prices, transient occupancy tax, TOT, and employment. Overall, we think it's a good look at how the community is doing economically, especially when you look at trends, although trends have been kind of difficult over the last several quarters. Last year, this event was held on February 15th. We had all the results in from the fourth quarter, and we had a completed survey. Today, on January 24th, we only have 3 of the 5 components available. So what you're seeing are results from the third quarter, kind of special report, where I have fourth quarter numbers. I will share them with you. Our index was up in the third quarter pretty dramatically, as you can see. So what's happened? As this chart shows, while most components are in a reasonable range, a huge spike in building permit activity is the cause for the increase. Building permits have always been a volatile component in the snapshot. However, this meteoric spike in permits in the third quarter, a seasonally adjusted 66 million, is up 80% from a year earlier, and 90% of that increase was in August, and specifically from multifamily units. All that apartment construction you're seeing now out on Eaton Road and at Merriam Park, Most of that was permitted in the third quarter. A total of 385 units were approved in August alone. This elevated activity is carried over to the fourth quarter, not shown here, with developers in part rushing to beat some fee increases before 2020 took place, and 52 million in permits were issued in the fourth quarter. So we had a really busy last half of the year. Since permits precede construction activity, you can bet that we're going to continue to see a lot of construction activity in 2020 and 2021. Now, sales tax used to be the steady Eddie component of the snapshot, easily predictable, as you can see in some of the past results, until about the time of the spillway incident, when it took a dive for a few quarters and then jumped up after the campfire. Now, you got to remember, this is seasonally adjusted sales tax, a little bit different than the actual numbers that Mark was talking about. There is a lot of money in town right now, a lot of money. We did see it settle back a little in the third quarter, but with fourth quarter data now in, sales tax is up 3.6%, and that's on a seasonally adjusted basis, 15% year over year. And those are big increases for the city, as Mark mentioned, and really good for sales tax. Housing. We all know what housing did after the fire. Since then, prices had been coming down. In the third quarter, average closed sales price was $396,000, down 6% from the previous quarter, but up 7% from before the fire. In the fourth quarter, not shown here, the average closed sale price was $414,000, up 3%. This multiple listing service data from the fourth quarter shows an upward progression of list prices, different from the average closed sales price. Upward progression of list prices throughout the quarter, starting at $497,000 in October and increasing to $573,000 by the end of December, an increase of 16%. The inventory also declined from 1.62 months at the beginning of the quarter to about a month at the end of December. Now, you know, I got to admit, this was during the holidays, not a typical quarter, but it's definitely interesting information anyway. This is not inventory equilibrium. This is not willing buyers equaling willing sellers. Equilibrium is probably about 3 months or perhaps even longer of inventory. So we're starting out 2020 with lower inventory and higher sales prices. With nearly 600 units, apartment units under construction right now, it's unlikely that we'll see and meet the demand for single-family housing really for years to come, and maybe even if ever, as you heard a little bit earlier. Single-family home prices will continue to increase, shutting out many working families and forcing them into multifamily housing because they just won't have an economic choice. And you know, inclusionary zoning is going to do nothing for our housing problem, nothing. Inclusionary zoning does not increase the supply of housing. It does not reduce the cost of construction. In fact, arguments can be made and that unless it is highly subsidized, and you all know what that means, it could actually reduce the supply of housing. There were over 2,000 homes sold in the Chico area last year, about 300 of them from new construction. In a similar environment, but a perfect 10% inclusionary zoning year, 30 homes might be made available to low and moderate income buyers at reduced prices, subsidized by the 270 other folks who bought newly constructed homes, and maybe some fee reductions, but that's an entirely different discussion. So 30 homes, if you're using last year's data, out of 2,000 would have lower prices. So how do we reduce the cost of the other 1,970? That's the question that needs to be answered. Transient occupancy tax, hotel bed tax, component that would normally reflect out-of-area folks staying in our hotels. We all know that after the fire, not a vacancy could be found, and TOT spiked. It's now coming back to earth. A couple of factors in the decline that you see. I think most of us know that after 30 days of occupancy, a hotel guest is no longer transient, and the tax is no longer charged. I don't think by the third quarter there were very many campfire victims still in hotels, although there certainly were workers in hotels. I would expect this number to continue to decline. However, as room rates go up, so does the tax. Employment in the county. the number of people with jobs is down. You just saw that the California Department of Finance estimates that there are 10,000 fewer people in the county than there were last year. That's about 4%. Magically enough, the number of people without jobs, or with jobs, excuse me, is about 4%. 4% down. You know, it's not rocket science. You lose 4% of the population, probably going to lose 4% of the jobs, especially if you look at all the jobs that we lost in Paradise. Employment is the primary driver of economic growth. Employment and population go hand in hand. The more jobs, the better the local economy. Fewer jobs, the local economy will suffer. Now this should be the most disturbing thing you see all day, maybe all week. I got this from Dr. Robert Eiler's presentation. It is population projections for Butte County through 2050, and some history as well. So from 2010 to 2008, this thing's gonna bounce because I got a bad angle, are the actual numbers. The gray line on the top is where the Department of Finance had projected the population in Butte County would go over the years prior to 2018. In 2018, they made an adjustment, and that's the gold line, one just a little bit under that, of the population growth. The red line is what actually happened, population dropping down 10,000, which is about the same level it was at a little over 10 years ago. Now the blue line on the bottom is the expected population if we grow at the same rate as the yellow line, right? And the red line there in the middle is the expected population if the growth rate doubles from where we expect it to be. So just kind of taking a look at those lines, it's not expected by the California Department of Finance that our population in the county will be where it was pre-fire for another 10 years, right? And if we were to double our growth, we may be able to get where we thought we were going to be prior to the fire in that same 10 years. Big gap, big gap. It's really a lost economic 10 years, right? Lost economic 10 years. I think it's good to remind you right now what Jolene said the other night and what we've said for a long time. Everything you see, this building, the car you drove in here on, the road you drove on, the houses you passed by, the police cars, the fire trucks, City Hall, heck, the shirt on your back, everything you see, unless it was put on this earth by God himself, is a result of successful businesses that pay taxes and employ people who pay taxes. That's it. That's it. And we need to ensure, as a community, that we grow successful businesses and we add jobs. We need jobs, we need people to fill those jobs, and we need to have places that they want to live, The snapshot is a look at the past. The Business Confidence Survey is a look at the future. It's a 5-question, multiple-choice survey of how local business owners and managers feel about the prospects of their own companies in the year ahead and how they feel the local and national economies will perform in the next 12 months. A score over 50 is an overall optimism about the local economy, and under 50 means just the opposite. I'll be the first to tell you, this isn't scientific. And to be a business owner, you gotta be optimistic or you won't sleep at night. However, it's a good indication of what local business owners and managers think, and it's been a pretty accurate predictor of our local economy. We are seeing a steady decrease in optimism in our survey. In June of 2018, before the fire, the score was 64.8. Just after the fire, it slipped to 61.8, and in our most recent survey, it's down to 55.2. Still optimistic, but significantly down from where it was pre-fire. There is very little change in our respondents' sales expectations over the next 12 months, with 59% expecting an increase in sales, and that's encouraging, especially since only 8% predict a decrease. Those who expect their profits to increase is down to 61%. Those who expect a decrease in their profits has grown from 7% last year to 15% this year. Employment expectations are off quite a bit. with just 25% expecting to grow their staff when it was 44% in our last survey. The number expecting to decrease the staff is up slightly to 7%. And you know, it should be good that more employers are looking at hiring people than cutting their staffs. However, this is the smallest difference that we've seen in the history of our survey. Local business conditions, the most significant change. It's the first time that our respondents answering better has fallen below same and worse. Optimism surrounding our local economy has slipped pretty dramatically. And take a look at this one as I sort through my notes here. This is the first time it's happened too. 72% think our national economy will be the same or worse, with almost 40% thinking it'll be worse. And that's with our stock market at all-time highs, the lowest unemployment in 50 years, and interest rates primed for growth. Personally, I think our national economy is doing pretty good. What I do think, though, is that too many people are getting their economic news from CNN. Our hot topic question: how confident are you that our local economy can recover from the campfire? 41% are very confident. That wasn't the box I checked. So I want to take you to the disturbing slide. Population projections for the county. You know, after the current artificial bubble of unsustainable cash that we're experiencing right now is no longer around, we are going to be faced with a slower economy. How can we not? You know, the difference between that gray line and the blue line, it's the lost promise of economic prosperity that we thought we had in 2018. And the likelihood is we're never going to recover that. We're never going to recover that. We hear all these optimistic projections for the next short period of time. But over the long haul, we're going to have to do something different if we want our economy to return to where it was pre-fire. So, what are you doing about it? I don't know if you remember last summer, Dr. Robert Eiler was here and spoke to a group of chamber folks, and he said we have two choices. We can hope everything will be okay, or we can plan for it if it isn't. Me, I hope that you have a plan ready to go. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate your presentation, and of course you have a copy of the economic snapshot, and I know that Mark is available if you want more clarification or you want to have further discussion with him. And that whole thing about hope is not a plan has resonated with many of us after hearing from Dr. Eiler. So at this time, I'm going to invite Board Chair Jolene Francis from Enloe Medical Center to come forward to discuss or to present to you the publication of our special report.
Good morning. Thanks, Katie. And thanks to all of you for being here. I know it's the middle of the workday, so we appreciate you being here. For the last several years, the Chamber Board Chair has been tasked with presenting the update to the Chamber Special Report, and I'd like to provide a little history and context to that for you. In 2015, the Chamber launched its Community Vision Project, aimed at identifying key quality of life factors that could be quantitatively and qualitatively measured from year to year, such as crime statistics, city finances and infrastructure improvements, and business leader perspectives. And the broad measurements that we identified that we wanted to track were a thriving business community, a healthy local government, a safe community, premier arts and recreation facilities, and all of those together equal a strong and vibrant community of Chico. In 2017, the Chamber Board created the Task Force on City Revenues and Expenditures to review and track community needs, available city revenues to meet those needs, and an analysis of expenditures. And since that time, the task force has prepared an annual special report as a tool to update the business community on the performance of these measurables. City staff continues to be a great partner and a resource in this effort, particularly our city manager, our assistant city manager, and city administrative services director, who provide context to the financial information that we receive and project trends going forward. Also contributing is our chief of police, our fire chief, and the director of public works and engineering. This year's special report that you have on your chair updates those critical measurements that we track. There is some positive news in the report, but there remains some glaring gaps that need to be filled. And again this year, our top concerns focus on safety, roads, workforce housing, and the unfunded pension liability. Some of these details you've heard from previous presenters this morning, and this conversation is going to come to you from the perspective of the business community. So let's start with workforce housing. As you heard, the Camp Fire destroyed approximately 14,000 housing units in Butte County, and this chart prepared by the Sonoma State University professor of economics, Dr. Robert Eiler, graphically depicts the hole that we need to dig ourselves out of, compared to other communities who have suffered similar disasters. Our line is the one that drops precipitously. When you see it in this format, you immediately recognize the urgency of this situation. Our economy, like every economy in the country, is dependent on successful business and the jobs they provide. Successful business is dependent on the availability of a stable, skilled workforce, and that workforce needs to be housed. Page 3 of the special report compares the number of housing units built in the city of Chico in the last 3 years provided by city staff. For some reason, our numbers differ a little bit than what you heard from the mayor today. I can't explain that. But clearly, we are falling far short of what our needs are. We actually built fewer single-family homes in 2019 than we did in 2018. There are many hurdles that need to be addressed regionally and locally, including the availability of skilled labor in the building trades and fast-tracking building approval processes. I'm disappointed that the mayor's not here for the Q&A session, because one of the questions that probably would have been addressed was why in this room last year he said that he thought that CEQA needed to be changed in order to improve the availability of housing stock in our region. And then 2 months later, actively lobbied against passage of AB 430 that would have lessened the CEQA impacts here. That would have been a nice question to have answered. There's really no easy answer here to this issue, but we must address it, and we must also push back against proposals that will further impede private investment in home development, because as you heard, it comes from the private sector. They're the ones building those homes. But we have to push back against things that are going to impede that, like inclusionary zoning. And those who would use CEQA to oppose needed infrastructure improvements or new development. And make no mistake, inclusionary zoning will stifle private investment in home development. Again, success of our economy is dependent on business, business is dependent on labor, and labor is dependent on housing. This concept is simple. The fix may be harder, but it has to be done, and it has to be done immediately, or we'll suffer the results that we just heard in this snapshot. The number one issue that our business community continues to be centered on is public safety. The task force has tracked crime statistics reported through the FBI Unified Crime Reporting System for the last 10 years. In 2018, we remained in the bottom quartile of California cities based on crimes per population, ranked 357 out of 461. The bottom quartile is not the quartile we want to be in. While it was good news to hear that violent crime decreased by 9% between 2018 and 2019, according to recent numbers released by the Chico Police Department, it's important to know that that result followed a 48% increase in violent crime reported between 2017 and 2018. The 10-year trend in crime statistics tracked by the task force clearly indicate that the number of violent crimes committed in 2018 and 2019 were the highest reported in those 10 years. Rapes in 2018 and 2019 were the highest reported in those 10 years. Property crimes between 2018 and 2019 were relatively flat. And yes, for some reason, overall, there was a modest reduction in total crime between 2018 and 2019. However, when viewed on a 10-year trend, The results should not be acceptable to any of us. I don't believe they're acceptable to the chief. I've heard him say that. And this report is not meant to be a criticism of our police department. Absolutely not. Chief O'Brien and his hardworking professional staff do all that they can to keep us safe and responded to 103,000 calls for service last year alone. They continue to face the challenges of an increased population, poorly crafted state legislation and early release programs, unhelpful city policies, and the same recruitment and retention issues facing the business community now. And now the council is proposing rescinding the sit-and-lie ordinance, one of the only tools police officers have to sort out those living on our streets that need help from those living on our streets who are preying on them. Recruitment and retention issues have handcuffed their ability to fully staff the street crimes unit on a year-round basis, even though it's been fully funded, and we appreciate that it's been fully funded. It's investing in, and it's interesting to note that the quality of life issues are included with compensation and cost of living as a reported reason that police officers are leaving Chico. Quality of life issues are one of the reasons they're leaving. Our report concludes that the perception of Chico as a safe community continues to erode, and that perception is validated by the 10-year trend in crime statistics. City elected leaders must make this their top priority in funding and policy decisions to ensure Chico PD is provided with all the tools they need to move the needle substantially in favor of public safety. In the last year, the Chico Fire Department modified their protocols with regard to low acuity medical responses, resulting in their overall calls for service reducing substantially. And this change saves the department resources related to their equipment while ensuring that adequate personnel are available for critical emergencies and fire response. Now, state legislation may negate those modifications in the future. However, the Chief Standridge continues to work very collaboratively towards finding permanent solutions to staffing and budgetary challenges, and we appreciate the work that he's doing. Station 1 in downtown Chico is undergoing renovations, and those have been funded. Station 2 needs renovation, that has not been funded. And the chief is exploring ways to improve response times in the northwest quadrant of the community. So let's transition to roads. Road conditions across the city continue to deteriorate several points per year. The pavement condition index dipped to 52 on the scale of 1 to 100, and each year that goes by dramatically increases the cost of improving our roads to an acceptable level, and many now require full reconstruction rather than maintenance. And Brendan reported that maintaining the PTI at 52, where it is now, and I don't think anybody's necessarily happy at 52, would require an annual investment of approximately $6.5 million. Improving it by 1 point per year would require $12.5 million, and the current budget allocates $3.2 million for road maintenance. The charts in the report reflect the escalating costs of delaying these improvements. Pressure must be applied to the City Council to ensure enough funding is dedicated to those road improvements. Now, the good news in this category is, of course, the $4.5 million improvement project that's been funded and is currently underway on the Esplanade between West 11th and Eaton Road, as well as the pending application for the grant that would widen and improve Bruce Road, including raising the bridge over Little Chico Creek. That critical infrastructure improvement is anticipated in 2021. However, we should prepare for a challenge to its completion by individuals who wish to prevent further development in East Chico. Be ready for that. So let's transition to pensions. We heard a little bit about this earlier. I don't even know what more there is to say about the unfunded PERS liability. Overall, that liability increased $12 million in the last reported year. The payments we are making do not even cover the annual interest that's accruing on that liability. And yes, we're paying interest on it. By 2026, annual pension expense will account for 58% of total payroll costs. Well, how much is your employer paying for your pension? I'm guessing it's not 58% of total payroll. This is a serious issue. Contracting for non-public safety positions in every available circumstance is a solution. It can be a solution. It's the only apparent solution that we have. The state is not working on a solution. PERS is not working on a solution. And the city council has to own this issue and address it locally. I've said this before, but in case they missed it, hope is not a strategy. I'm happy to hear that Mark say that the city will seek relief in the court systems, but this is a huge issue, and it's got to be addressed. So the conclusions of the report call for action to reduce crime, improve our roads, increase workforce housing, and address ballooning pensions. And the chamber calls on the business community to engage in these solutions, because as Mark pointed out, government doesn't have all the answers. We need to engage, and we need to help out. But we also need to ensure that our elected officials make these issues their only priorities until the city council, they must make it their only priority until lasting positive results are achieved. Lasting positive results. This should be the only things they're focusing on until we get where we need to be. So I hope you appreciate the report. We'll answer any questions. We're going to do a Q&A now with our panel. So thanks for coming this morning.
We do have an opportunity for questions if people want to get those off to Heather and to Becky on either side. If there's any additional questions. We did have questions for the mayor, but he left, so we don't really have that opportunity. But I do have a question, and I think this probably goes to Mark Orme. This is regarding downtown. What can we do to quickly rezone downtown areas to allow smart growth that is mixed-use housing and businesses, including affordable housing, for parking lots and more biking and mass transportation? So, what can we do? For less parking. So, what can we do about zoning?
The general plan already points in that direction. Infill development is one of the primary foci of our general plan, which was put in place. And really, one of the things that the city has done is plan for that and that growth and attempting to ensure that those high-density developments can occur. And so that's already in place. To a large degree, it takes the private sector and the economy to dictate that type of growth. So all the city can typically do is properly look to the future in their planning documents, which they have on that front. And that's probably the best answer I can give on that one. And it takes private investment to go from there.
Okay. So this next question, and it's long and it's hard for me maybe to read. But I think, Mark, this will go to you. That the statement that the development community, and I guess this was probably addressed to the mayor. Would that be correct? But let me read it anyway. The statement that the development community will not address market rate affordable is naive to the actual market. The costs of labor and real estate in a strong market, along with development costs and fees, almost, oh gosh, I can't read this. Okay, is it the city's belief that with inclusionary zoning requirements, the local developers will increase their risk exposure, or will they be more likely to simply build in the surrounding communities?
Remember how I said staff is apolitical?
Yeah. Maybe Mark,
Still
I don't
my
know.
statement.
Maybe Mark Francis wants to talk about inclusionary zoning.
My microphone doesn't come out. No, I don't want to talk about inclusionary zoning, and nobody else should either.
Okay.
Really,
Okay.
But it's been something that was talked about when I was on the council 30 years ago, and like I said, it does not increase the supply of housing, and it doesn't reduce the cost of construction. It just doesn't, and it's not going to help our overall problem. And to think that it will is fantasy.
Okay. So next question: redistricting. And I'm not. I guess maybe Mark Orme, you would be the one for this. As a Latino in current District 1, which is now designated 4, how will the city ensure representation on the city council with the council's recent decision to block the election in 2020? Oh, I'm sorry, he's in District 7. So as lead Latino in current District 7, which was 4, how will the city ensure for representation on the city council with the council's recent decision to block the election in 2020 in their district?
Remember how I said staff is apolitical?
Yeah, good answer.
The one council member I see didn't vote for that, so I don't think she can answer it either. So I know Councilmember Schwab's here, but I don't. Yeah.
I know. Okay.
I don't know if there's anybody else here that could.
Okay. Okay, and next question for Mark Orme. The mayor mentioned possibly using city property for housing the homeless. What areas could be considered?
Yeah, that's been a complex issue for multiple years. It's been one of the things that we've been working on. We looked at all of our city property. One of the very first things I did back in 2013 was evaluate city property and what could be pushed back into the private sector, because when the city owns it, it does do nothing other than sit there and doesn't have any property tax. So we're able to push a number of those pieces back out to the private sector. But the properties that we do have, they've been looked at and they're complex. There's maybe a couple parcels that might make sense, but they're complex. One's owned by the redevelopment agency. And so what we've done is we've put out a request for information. It's still open on our website. If anybody has any fantastic ideas of types of housing, whether it's homeless related or any other type of housing type, we're interested in seeing what people have as solutions. Right now we don't have one.
Okay. So next question is to the chamber, so I'll take this. What can the chamber and the Chico business owners do about a mayor who cares so little about economic growth that he is openly hostile to members of this community? And I guess what we would say, if you're in his district, you can vote, right? Any more questions? Mark Francis, how about you take this one? What are the necessary tasks to allow for development and affordable workforce housing? Necessary tasks.
I'm a banker. Come on, I'm not a developer. You know, that's not a question I can answer, honestly. Maybe Mark Orme can, the other Mark.
So what are the necessary tasks to allow for the development of workforce housing?
Well, I mean, obviously there has to be a market. We have the market for it. There has to be properly zoned land. We've properly zoned land for it. It's market forces that allow for the creation of housing, whether it be workforce or any type of housing. And so, like I said earlier, the city council has done due diligence to ensure that there's ample land availability to be developed, and now it's just the market to shift in that direction and allow for those developments to occur. One primary issue there is the regulations that are in place, as I mentioned earlier, and they're burdensome. It's not as easy just to go out and pop up a bunch of homes nowadays, from lid requirements for development of properties. There's a lot of very well-intentioned regulations that are costly, and so I think what you're going to see is you're going to see the city do everything it can to help encourage, but there's only so much room we have to help. And we will do everything we can to help with workforce housing because we know it's vital and necessary. And we're hoping, too, that our partners throughout, and I know the county's working diligently to work with our other municipal agencies out there, we have to share the burden of creating that housing stock, and Chico can't do it all on its own.
Okay, thank you. Well, Mark Orme, you're up again. This is about roads, or maybe we do this to Brendan.
Awesome.
How is the city using SB1 gas tax dollars to fix the roads? I thought this bill was placed to help road infrastructure. How much money are we receiving, if any?
That's a great question. So we started receiving SB1 dollars last year in the amount of about $1.5 million per year. So you saw the totals I presented that our current budget is about 3.2. So it increased it, but it's still not enough to meet our needs. I don't believe really SB1 was intended to meet our full needs, but it helps subsidize our needs and give us more funding so we can do more miles of roadway. But it is still just a percentage of what our total needs are. We used SB $1 on the Cohasset road widening, and a big chunk of the SB $1 will be used on the Esplanade reconstruction project going this summer to construction.
Okay, great, thank you. So Mark Francis, I think you can answer this one. So regarding the economic snapshot, does the 5% or the 0.5% in sales tax in Q3,
Sales tax decrease?
yes, sales tax in Q3, oh man, I can't read this. Something adjustments made after errors in payments from the COTFA system changes? So does the so I'm not exactly sure what that means.
So what can happen with sales tax is that it's not reported correctly from quarter to quarter sometimes. And I don't believe that was the case in the third quarter with the seasonal adjustment, especially the seasonal adjustment that we made. But it can happen that it's incorrectly reported one quarter, they make up for it the next quarter.
The next quarter. Okay, any more questions? Okay, so no more questions. Went longer than we thought, but thank you, everybody. Next year, we will see when the League of Cities meet, and we will not have any conflicts so that we can have the mayor. So at this time, I'd like to thank the City of Chico for partnering with us today, CARD for providing this space, and thanks to the Chamber's legacy partners, Liability HR and Payroll, California Water Service, Golden Valley Bank, Sierra Nevada Brewery, and Orange Theory Fitness. And also, we'd like to thank our media partners, Action News Now, BCAC TV, Chico ER, Chico News and Review, Deer Creek Broadcasting, and KIXE. So the special report will be available on our website later today and the video next week. So thank you everyone for coming. Have a great Friday.